first break. Generally, stuff like that will be a mix of it'll be a mix of breaks, recorded material from our drummer Kevin, and single hit drums.
And drum-wise, I mean, when you're talking about the stuff that he does, then is it here? Will you'll kind of maybe get a groove going and just let him play along to it, or?
Yeah, we've generally got the track in quite a good, in a pretty good shape before he comes and does anything on it.
Right.
Just so that we know what we want from recording the drums in the first place. Otherwise, we end up with too much material and not really sure what to do with it all.
Is it the adding of the human drummer to give it the bit of funk, the bit of groove, or whatever? Or?
In a way, but we tend to use Pro Tools and sort of get Beat Detective on the drums anyway, just to align them up to the grid.
Right.
Just so it makes it easy to manage within a mix like this. Otherwise, it gets a bit train wreck ish.
And in terms of EQ then, or processing on those drums, how much do you fiddle with them?
As much or as little as possible. We'll just tend to cut where we need to, boost where we need to.
Yeah.
And apart from that, it's all about suppression of elements that we don't want in the mix.
Yeah.
But if it's not good to start with, we won't use it.
And in terms of that bottom end, then, are there key frequencies that you know you're going to need in terms of the rhythms for one of your tracks?
Yeah, you've sort of got a mental map the whole time, a mental map of the of where everything should be.
Yeah.
And I guess you're constantly listening out for those frequencies. We'll often just mix the track just with a low pass on the master and just mix everything like that, or take a sort of band filter and make a band filter with an EQ and then just sweep up and down the frequency range and try and fit everything into its place.
Yeah, yeah. And does it? Can you more or less make that blueprint fit any track, or do you find that different tracks will require different?
Different tracks require slightly different ranges. I mean, the standard Pendulum sounding range is, I guess, sort of 80 to 100 hertz for snare, 175 to 200 hertz for 80 to 100 hertz for kick, and then snare from sort of 175 to 200 hertz.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if we can't work within that frequency range, we get a new sample.
Yeah. So, I mean, on top of that basic break there, what else have we got in here then?
Generally, we'll export breaks that we've made and then use them in other tracks or process them differently.
Yeah.
Like just there is a sort of. That's a snare from another break which we were using on another track and didn't end up being used. We exported and we're just using the snare from that element.
Yeah.
And then some of Kevin's drums alongside that. Some other elements of the break that we've processed a bit differently. Extra sort of claps and things to give it width that we process a bit differently.
But immediately as that kick came in there, you can feel how much that does add to everything that's there. How much time do you spend on getting that kick right?
Too long.
The bass then, adding that in, and have you got a machine or a bit of software that you find that a lot of your bass comes from? Is it all live? Is it a mix of the two?
No, it's usually either FM8 or Zeta.
Yeah.
To be honest, but I mean, we can pretty much use anything as long as it's got the right waveforms.
Yeah.
There's sort of a lot of analysis of harmonics and which harmonics and which waveforms are going to contain harmonics that are going to interfere with the rest of your mix, such as the kick and the snare and all that.
Yeah. Can we have a listen to the bass line in with those?
I'm not sure whether your camera will pick it up, but we can have a go.
Oh, yeah.
We'll usually have a few different plugins just for some different types of curve for the bass that as we want it to come down. Like you'll hear this bass, the first bass comes down with the pitch envelope a lot slower than the rest of them. So we usually set that up on a few different plugins just for all the different things we want to do with it.
Yeah. And obviously with something like that, your monitors are crucial, aren't they? Have these been here as long as the studio? Have you gone through a few sets to find ones that will work?
We've gone through a few sets. We went through Mackie 824s. We went through these custom designed ones, Mitchell and Todd XL 301s, which are actually quite good.
And was it because the bottom end was fooling you on them?
Well, the bottom end on the Mackies are quite good. I guess it's the rest of the frequency range that we were worried about. I think the bass on the Mackies is great.
Yeah.
It's the mids and the top end that aren't up to scratch, I think.
Yeah.
Whereas with the K&H 0300 range, having a three-way split system, just the mids are so much more defined that we could actually mix them instead of on the Mackies just letting it go, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose the other key thing in terms of the music before we move on to the live stuff is lots and lots of lead lines.
Yeah.
Again, where do they come from, and at what point will a song start with a lead line sometimes?
It can do, yeah. It's sort of rare since we tend to like leaving that up to the last minute. But it generally comes from sort of Reactor, Massive, Albino, Silent, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't mind me saying, I mean, it's those lead lines. I mean, they're obviously quite sort of nice in in many ways. Do you ever think of them as nice?
Not really, no.
No.
We try to make them abrasive at first, and then take them away so they're not harsh.
Yeah.
Basically. So.
And I suppose when I say nice, not so much the sound of, but you know, nice tunes. It's kind of. It'd be interesting to hear them.
It's it's kind of mad since tracks like Slam and Propane I actually hear as sounding quite evil, and then other people hear them and they do say, "Oh, I like that nice catchy tune." I'm like, it's not meant to be catchy. It's meant to sound like the fucking apocalypse. There's a lot of layering even with the synths. You know, even with this, I think the lead's being done by Reactor, Imposca, and Albino. So we've got So we'll have a sort of composite made up of Imposca,
Yeah.
Albino, Reactor, and then all of them together.
Oh man, yeah, you really, yeah, kind of going to town on that, aren't you? Really?
Yeah, but it's all to fill in. They're all filling in each other's gaps, both frequency range wise and within the stereo field. Like a lot of the time, we'll mix just by taking the center channel out, and we'll just mix the stereo feed for an hour.
Yeah.
Just using Waves S1 or whatever, switch it into MS mode, and then we'll just mix using the stereo signal.
Yeah. But when it comes to recording vocals, guitars and stuff,
recording stuff.
Yeah, it's all done here.
Yeah.
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 And much processing with that.
As much as we need to do, I tend to process everything to disk. If we need to compress the vocals a bit before it goes in, we compress the vocals a bit before it goes in.
Yeah.
Generally, I find compressing vocals before it goes into the converters is much better than just letting him go in raw.
Yeah. And with guitars as well, is it amps, or is it straight in and then do all your fiddling about and getting your warmth or distortion or whatever you need to do, getting it inside the computer?
It's mostly using amps.
Yeah.
And occasionally, maybe for clean sounds or whatever, just amp simulation. Sometimes, I mean, especially during in silico, we used reamping, those radial reamping boxes to be able to record the clean sound of the guitar and then amplify it again afterwards out of the converters into the reamping box and then to the amp.
Yeah.
So we had a sort of choice of what amp we could actually use. So that's just that's sort of Perry playing some 80s loop with his with an electric and then doubling up with an acoustic guitar, which we record with two KM84s through a TG1.
Yeah.
Like that. So yeah.
In terms of the production side of things then, I mean, once you've got it all there, by the time it's put together, is it more or less sounding as you want it to sound? Or then, after having put it all together, do you then start the new task of mixing it?
We mix as we go along, and then I'll once we've got everything recorded in, obviously it needs rebalancing, so I'll tend to rebalance it as we're going along and as we're recording, and then sort of after everything's in there and we've laid the track out completely, I'll do a final mix of just cleaning stuff up and fixing any problems.
Yeah, and is it all done here?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Everything. Literally uploaded to the mastering place from here.
Yeah?
Yeah. Well, for the live shows, it requires me to sit here rendering different elements that we can play.
Yeah.
Because obviously playing a track with 167 audio tracks is slightly impossible, but you can condense that and just like you group or stem a bunch of tracks in the sequencer, you can group or stem some stuff that you want to play.
Yeah.
So anything that's got multiple synths or anything that we can't load onto the receptors, we'll just export as a sample pack, you know, going from like C1 to C6.
Yeah.
And load that into contact on the receptors.
Yeah.
But generally, if we can, if it's like Zeta or if it's a B station or whatever, we'll just throw the patch onto the receptors, and it'll be running as the same as the synth was in Nuremberg. The Zeta thing I use on stage is MIDI, just a MIDI controller.
Yeah.
But it's quite an advanced MIDI controller.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly no keyboards that would really stand up to what that thing can do.
Yeah.
It's pretty much modular in its control. You can trigger any note from any sensor on it. It's got about 12 to 20 different sensors on it, from like ribbon pads to polyphonic buttons, and you can set them up in any way that you want.
And none of that horrible delay you got with the early MIDI guitars.
Nothing. It's because it's not sensing. It's not sensing a pitch.
Yeah.
You're not plucking a note and then it has to decipher what the note is and send that to a fucking MIDI unit. It's on and off contacts that are pressure sensitive, like a keyboard.
Yeah.
And everything's going off to the Muse Research receptors. Everything, the guitars, bass, drums, everything's processed by them.
Yeah. And in terms of mixing it on in the live situation, is that do you keep control over that really?
Yeah, we use the Digi Design venue system for mixing it. And that system changed the way we did things completely, because you can actually record a sound check as you're doing it, and then you're recording all the parts into Pro Tools as they're coming off stage.
Yeah.
Then you can flip it. You can flip the transfer mode, so the desk is now playing off Pro Tools, and you can mix the show just like you're still sound checking.
Yeah.
So that completely changed the way we did things. We could now, sort of stand in front of the stage and mix the show as if we were playing it, and being able to load the same plugins that we use in here, the sort of Sony stuff, the Wave stuff, the TC electronic stuff, it does make a big difference.